Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program. This is a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew, author of such novels as Touch Your Nose and Jacoby Street, and founder of Engine Books. Let's see what we have today. Well, thank you all for joining us here on the Write Project podcast. I am here with Paul David Power. He's got a new book, Crippled, out through Breakwater Books, which is a story about love, death, life, and redemption. So just little themes, nothing too heavy, you know what I mean? You'll laugh, you'll cry, you will walk away with a new perspective about life and what matters. It's based on a play which has garnered many awards. This is actually a play book, like a script book that has garnered many awards. I don't think it's being played right now, but we're looking at some dates further in the year, I believe, from what I was seeing. Congratulations on the book, Paul. I've read it. It is lovely. Absolutely. You're right. It is. So the description's apt. It's very, very powerful. I'm looking forward to in non-COVID times when I can get out to the Playhouse again to actually come out, bring the wife out and see it. But thanks for coming on and bringing this to us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
No, absolutely. Okay, so tell me a little bit about Crippled. Like, I know the book, obviously. I know that this is this, from the description. I know that it's semi-autobiographical. It's kind of like that. So tell me about the process, how you decide, because there's a moment. You know what I mean? There's a moment in an author's life when they're writing something that's autobiographical where they go, you know what? I'm gonna write some of this down. You know what I mean? Like there's
Absolutely.
Tell me about that moment, how that happened for you, how it came, how this changed from just a life event into a creative project.
Well, I've been writing for theater for many years, but more on the light side, I guess, or comedy side, more like slapstick pieces actually, and I actually got away from playwriting for a while, working in the corporate world, writing blogs for healthcare services and stuff like that. That fulfilling artistic thing, which is not. So,
Yeah.
As an artist, you need to make a living. But back in 2013, I was actually living in New Brunswick with my partner of 9 years, Jonathan, and he suddenly passed away. With an aortic dissection, it's called, which is it's a very sudden occurrence. He wasn't sick or anything, so it certainly shocked me, and one of those moments that we all have different times in our lives that changes our lives. And from that, I went through a lot of grief and healing and all that sort of stuff. And about 2 years after that occurrence, after losing Jonathan, it was about 2015, and I'd been doing a lot of things to deal with grief, like drawing and sketching, writing bad poetry, songs, even video editing, tribute videos and that sort of thing. All a creative outlet to sort of get that out or express what I was feeling. And from that, it stemmed to I think I'd like to get back, to full-time arts world, and playwriting is my passion. I love writing, dialogue, and I thought maybe I'd write a play about grief, about losing Jonathan. And the crux of it came from the idea that, where Jonathan passed away suddenly, and I wasn't present when he passed away, but I still didn't have that goodbye. I didn't have that last dialogue. So as a playwright, I had that need to want to say that or to share that dialogue with Jonathan. So I created it in my head, and that idea or that need stemmed from just wanting to emotionally heal to maybe this could be a full length play. And I contacted a really good friend of mine from our university days and accomplished writer, Robert Chafe, who also turned out to be my mentor, to he basically was my dramaturge for this and pushed me to explore and make a full-length play out of it. And so it's basically I guess a love story, and losing a partner. But besides that, it is autobiographical, like you said. So I stay true to myself as who I am, or who the character Tony is, who represents me. And so I was honest about living with a disability, which Paul David Power, the writer actor, does. And so the character has leg braces and crutches, which is how I get around. And I guess the disability component came into it, and it's touched on. It's part of who the character is. It's not the driving force of the story. The driving force of the story, of course, is meeting someone, and that grief journey. And hence the name Crippled, which is, it comes from the character living with a disability. And that was actually the word used when I was growing up, because I'm old. So it's back in the 70s, right? And that term was more acceptable than, of course, it is now. But also emotionally crippled, trying to move on, dealing with grief. So that's really how Crippled, the play, stemmed. And it was really, I really learned a lot from the creative process. I really enjoyed the creative process. I wasn't in a rush, as previously in theater, to get something produced, or, okay, let's get this written in a few months and let's produce it, let's get it on the stage. And I really learned to appreciate the creative process. A lot of that had to do with Robert Shape, but it also had to do with just the emotional part of it. And it was really, really healing. And it was about 3 or 4 years working on the script. And through that, it really helped me deal with my grief, or come to terms, I guess, a lot with the loss of a partner. And it was a definite example of, creativity, or the arts can really have a healing power as well.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad you mentioned actually that that the term crippled is no longer in acceptable use, kind of thing. It's still used, but it's not not considered kind of acceptable in polite society, only because, like, I'm gonna have to edit this because, like, from before, because I was stuttering when I was doing the intro, trying to say, like, I've now said that word 3 times on this video, which is 3 more times than I've said it my entire life previous to this.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about that too. I got some letters about that and everything as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like what kind, like positive or less positive?
Pardon me?
Like positive letters or less than positive letters?
A couple of negatives, like I'll try to give you a soundbite here, but I mean, the title Crippled, it had negative connotations and then the positive connotations within today's society. And a few of my editors in that really wanted me to change the title, but I was dead set against it, because like I said, it's being truthful to who the character was. And there's a monologue shared in that play about growing up with a disability, leg braces and crutches, in the 70s and 80s, and actually being called crippled, and the term crippled. And it stuck with me as Paul, and sticks with the character sharing that. But it's also about being, emotionally crippled when you actually get into the play and either see it or read it. And it's a good term, especially for those of us, well, most of us have experienced some kind of grief, and it really cripples your ability to carry on, to start a new life, or to even feel emotionally. So, I mean, the word crippled, it's such a negative connotation because of what people think it means. But I mean, there's actually dialogue in the play that explains the dictionary meaning of the word, right? And but as far as emotionally crippled, that's really what sums up the play and the character, and what the character is dealing with in the play.
For sure. And what's interesting when you say that, like, I'm kind of like realizing and interrogating in my own head and going like this, I'm like, I'd absolutely use that, like, say, in moments of grief, like when someone asks how I'm doing, I would easily say, oh, I'm emotionally crippled or something like that, because it's the other side. Like, there's the 2 uses of the word, and one of them's semi-acceptable and the other's less acceptable. It's like when it's aimed at yourself, it's almost somehow acceptable, but when it's used as a slur, it's less so. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And yeah, it's in context as well, right? He's a cripple has much more of a negative connotation than I feel emotionally crippled. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Also, like with the latter, you're being vulnerable, so it's more people give you more leeway for your language when you're being that kind of vulnerable, when you're describing horrible feelings and feelings of grief and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the interesting thing also is, I've gotten an opportunity in the theater world to go to a lot of seminars and workshops and that different things across the country before the pandemic hit, and uh, a lot about learning about disability theater, as it's called, and the growth of it, or even the barriers those actors and writers find who identify as a disability. But it's also the word cripple has been taken back by that artistic community. It's the first time I learned, back up in Ontario or out west, there's terms like crip time, and crip arts, that sort of thing. The name has been taken back and given ownership to those who identify as living with some kind of disability.
That makes sense. Actually, I had someone else on a while back, and it was a similar thing where we were talking about kind of a label like that, and she was very much saying, like, it's very weird to deal with society at large, where it's like they've put this label on you, and then they've said this is what you are. Until then, you decide to own it, and you say, like, okay, well, I'm going to take it back and say this is what I am. Then all
Right.
of a sudden, society says, no, that word's not acceptable. We don't use that in polite society anymore. So whichever way, whether they're putting it on you and you don't want it, or they're not letting you have it when you do want it, your society just is horrible.
Right. And I get confused. I mean, a lot of times I find myself lucky enough to be in situations like this, doing interviews and speaking publicly, and I don't know anymore. I live with a disability, and I don't know what the acceptable term is. So I sort of believe I choose terms that are acceptable for me and I'm comfortable with. And no, do I use cripple to describe myself? No, but I just use disability. But above all, I'm a playwright. I'm an actor, and my name's Paul.
Exactly. Question. So given that this might be a sensitive question, and if you don't want me to ask it, then I'll just cut this part out. But so given what you were telling me about the genesis of the play a moment ago, and that you did it to deal with grief, because I've written for that reason before. I think every person who writes has at some point written to excise something, whether it's deal with anger or deal with grief or deal with negative emotions,
Right.
or difficult emotions. Did you find that it worked? Were you able to process anything through writing this book, or like, do you feel like it was successful in that endeavor, and would you recommend that to other writers?
I would totally recommend writing as a means to find emotional peace, or to accept, any death, of course, and grief, or any setback we find or challenge in life. Through my process, I noticed difficulty writing some words, some key words, like especially I'm talking about now grief and saying goodbye. I don't think I ever said before writing Crippled. I always said, Jonathan passed away. I couldn't say the word I'm dead, things like that. But I wrote it, and it was difficult to write. Sometimes I'd write a line, and then go and cry, letting that emotional thing out. I'm pretty. People might argue with you, but I'm not a big talkative person in the way of my feelings and everything, or I find that difficult sometimes. Regardless, I just wrote a play about it, but I find it's easier to write about, to express myself in writings. So it really gave me an opportunity to say what I was feeling in the way of grief and what I was feeling towards Jonathan. And the biggest thing was the saying goodbye and accepting that, he wasn't coming back. And I remember, it's an interesting situation too, like with writing it and then performing in it. I remember we had the premiere of the play back in 2018 down at the LSPU Hall. I performed the play, and I walked off the stage and broke down in tears. That was a moment in my life, yeah, I'll always remember. But it was so, as difficult as it was and emotional as it was so therapeutic, and it was getting those feelings out. So, I mean, I've also learned, giving advice to your listeners, just sit down and write. So many things, so many thoughts, so many feelings I feel come out through the pen or the keyboard that I didn't even know were there. I find that really, really therapeutic, even today in whatever I'm dealing with in my life. And I find that so beneficial.
I agree. Yeah. No, I can see that. I find it very, the times in my life I've had to write through negative emotions. I find it very I don't know. When I write, even when I'm writing about myself, it is even when it's nonfiction, it's a fictional version of myself, and it's a way that you can almost put the mask on and be like, and almost alter the experience, and you know what I mean? Yeah, it's interesting.
It also gives you a lot of opportunity to say things or do things that I wouldn't do.
Yeah.
I'm much braver in my writing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Those moments when you step away from a situation and you're like, I wish that person had talked to me. Here's what I would have done. You can actually do that when you write it.
Yeah. So take it one step. I do a lot of. I would have said this when I'm in the shower, right?
Yeah.
I'm very brave in the shower, but take it one step further too in your writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, what are common traps for aspiring writers? If you find that mistakes, pitfalls that young authors make, what advice would you give for avoiding X?
Just keep working at it. I think taking time and not rushing. My first draft of my play Crippled was 12 pages, and I told the whole story in 12 pages. And I thought, hey, there's no story there, but once I took my time and just enjoyed the process instead of getting to the end, it works out a lot better.
Who inspired you to write?
That's a great question. I'd have to say I did a theater course back in 1993 at MUN, and that's when I first started getting involved, in theater, and especially the local scene. And about 2 years after that, being involved in different plays, I noticed not a lot of work out there for people with disabilities or who identify with a disability. So my first play that I wrote a disabled character within the play, to give myself a role and hopefully others. And from that, one of my inspirations from a local lens is Robert Chafe, who's been my dramaturge and mentor, and I love his work as a playwright. And I aspire to be as great as he is, both artistically and as an artist. He's so supportive within our community. But yeah, it stemmed from the need, I think, for more diversity in the types of plays that we see in Newfoundland and in Canada.
Absolutely. Okay, that makes sense. I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah. What did you do with the first money you made from writing?
You know what? I've been writing for a long time, but if we're talking about creative writing, the first time I ever got paid was for an improv show, with a bunch of theater people. But I wrote a sketch, and at the time I was still in university, and I got paid $100. And I thought that was amazing that, you could write something and get paid for it. And it was $100. And we're going back a while now. I bought a CD Walkman. For those listeners who don't know what that is, you can Google it. But we used to have CDs and put them in a Walkman.
A CD Walkman.
That's right.
All right, that's long enough ago. I have a follow-up question. So you were paid $100. How much was that in today's dollars?
Oh gosh, that'd be like a few $100s, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was a big purchase.
I'm just being a brat.
$1,000.
Yeah.
I bought a phonograph.
Nice. Yeah. All right. This is a weird question. It's a very silly question. Paul.
Yeah.
If you were a jam, what jam would you be? What flavor of jam?
It's very deep. Raspberry.
Okay. Is there a reason?
Raspberry, yeah, okay, because it seems very, very sweet, but there's this underlying tartness or bitterness.
That makes sense. That's right. Okay. All right. I got it.
What
That's
kind of jam would you be?
Marmalade.
Marmalade. Is that a jam?
I don't know. At what point, like, all the process is the same for making it a jam. It's made it of a fruit, not a berry. So afterwards, you call it something different, which seems ridiculous.
I never got marmalade. Well, it's not very common in Newfoundland, right?
It's not. Yeah. Again, that tartness. You know what I mean? It's made out of orange peels. It's like, why is this? Why does this even exist?
Right.
Yeah. It exists because Newfoundland, like in poor places like Newfoundland, you couldn't throw anything that had calories like this.
Right.
Yeah. It has calories. It goes in. Do you have any unpublished or half-finished books? If so, or plays or whatever? If so, how many would you guesstimate you have that are just unfinished?
Yes, I do have many of those. Your work started and I got off to something else. I'd say at least a dozen, and not just a few plays.
Yep.
A few going to be the great Canadian novels.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm also working on right now a new play for the St. John Short Festival.
Okay.
And I was supposed to send them an outline like yesterday, and I'm revealing this now, and so I got to get at that. I'm halfway through that.
Yep. So you're halfway through. The deadline was yesterday. Seems like we're all set.
Actually, I have not. I'm okay. I have not met a writer or an artist who do not work the same way. It's the deadlines are. Well, you're going to have to get up on that stage and perform this brand new piece, and so I better get working.
I recall that actually. I was in drama in school when I was younger, and I remember vividly working on a play with a few friends of mine, and we were going to put it off, and the last 10 pages of the play weren't written. So when we performed, so we reached that point where it's like, all right, well, we'll improv it on the stage. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you an interesting story about Crippled, where we're touring and performing it, or we were, and we'll be back again. But before it was published by Breakwater, thank you, Breakwater. But before it was published, every single time we'd have a tour or performance of it and space in between, I'd always go back and improve it. Right, it was a never-ending project, and so when we were doing the final edits for the publication with Breakwater, I was very nervous because I was like, well, this is it, Paul. This is you got to stick with this now once it's published. So yeah.
Within reason. I mean, people like going to a show and seeing like a slightly different version, the same way they like going to a concert and seeing, like, oh, they did a different play on their songs this time, like the Grateful Dead.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can promote me like the Grateful Dead. I like that.
Yeah. There's an official version now, like a sanctified version, but you're not married to that version when you're live.
No, and anybody who has acted with me knows that his lines could change anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, how do you select names for your characters?
You know what? That's a cool question. When I was younger and writing something, I just sort of picked them on the fly. But since then, I've become much more thoughtful with the names. I go to baby books. I Google. I want the name to mean something that reflects the character or the intention of the character, and I find that really, really fascinating. I learned so much about different names, and it makes the character more real. And the character's name, has some significance. It's not just, Fred for the sake of Fred.
Yeah, I used to, it was very random. I used to, back in the old days, in the ancient times, when I had a wall of CDs, like a rack of them, I would pick out a CD at random when I came up with a new character, and I'd look on the back, and I would go down to the credits at the bottom of the back, like the producers, and I would just pick a random first name and a random last name from, like, the people behind the scenes, not the actual artist.
Right.
And then, there you go, that's the character name. It had no meaning whatsoever.
I used to use too when we used to have them phone books. Phone books used to be great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Phone books did used to be great. They still make those, and that's the thing. The fact that we stopped making CDs and we still make GD phone books is ridiculous. Who uses a phone book?
I know it's yeah, still shows up in the mailbox, and he's like, "What is this?"
You know what they should do? They should stop printing phone books, and they should just every year print enough copies of Crippled for every man, woman, and child in the province, pay you for them, and send them out. The government should start doing that. People will get better use out of it than the phone books.
Absolutely. It would be a community service. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Paul, what did you edit out of this play in particular? So with Crippled, is there a scene that made it to the cutting room floor? And if so, why?
There is a scene that my character, he's reflecting on when he was younger, and again, he lives with a disability using leg braces and crutches as I do. And it was a memory from my childhood of going to, I was raised Catholic, so we went to church every Sunday, and the priest was going to bless me, and I thought, and he'd just gotten back from Portugal or something, the priest had, so and apparently there were all these miracles that happened, and he brought back holy water from there, and the priest was going to bless me, and I guess whatever language, I'm talking like I was maybe 5 years old, so I interpreted whatever, and I thought, I was going to be healed, and the disability was going to go away, and there's a story in there about going up being blessed by the priest with this special holy water, and bang, nothing happened. I was quite disappointed, and all that in my 5-year-old mind, and it's a lovely little story, and I've got it set aside to maybe put somewhere else.
I do that.
Yeah, but my dramaturg is Robert Chave. He's getting mad at me now, but he made me drop it. I think it was because it wasn't reflective of the actual direction of the story, which was about the partnership between myself and Jonathan, or the character Tony and Jonathan, and it might have even just been for space. I'm not sure, but that's the cool thing. Like when you work with a dramaturg or an editor, they see things that you don't necessarily see, to make your writing or the story more focused and a clearer direction. And I got lots of little pieces that are tucked in a drawer, tucked in my computer somewhere.
Yeah, I can see that. That sounds like a cool story, though. That sounds like it could be a cool short story, or like I'm picturing like I don't know, like a TV show where it's like it's you narrating, looking back on like a life, like, you know what I mean? And they, know, those shows where they do the quick flashback to like that time when I thought I was going to be cured, you know what I mean?
Right?
Or healed. Yeah. That is
sort of like a Wonder Years sort of thing, right?
Yeah. Or the young Sheldon, what they do now.
Young Sheldon, yes.
Yeah. But it's interesting the way that you phrase that. Sometimes you can tell so much about a situation just by the way people phrase that, because there's two ways to say that you were brought up Catholic. You can say, I was raised Catholic, or you could say, I am a Catholic. You know what I mean?
Right.
Two very different meanings.
I always say like I was raised on Catholic guilt. It's like
I always have to fight the urge to be like I was raised Catholic. I apologize. Oh boy. Well, Paul, that's amazing. It's been a pleasure talking to you and sharing this with you. Everyone, please check out Crippled from Breakwater Books, wherever their books are sold. It's worth a read. You'll enjoy it, and it'll be an experience for you. You'll get like it was for me. You'll and it's all script form. You'll get through it fairly quickly and have that kind of experience, and it's wonderful. And when the play is back in theaters, please check it out. It's definitely worth seeing. Paul, thank you very much for coming on the Right Project podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time, or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.